Who's ready for another Catalyst Conundrum? Episode number 11. What is bias? So, as always, we're framing this out. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. Think about that. Think about how it connects to all the things that we're talking about, the whole idea of simplicity. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. So I'm going to break this down into two parts. The first part, the first chapter, first section, the first act, whatever you want to think of it as, it's a chunk. Okay. So this is clean part. And why are we talking about bias? Why is it important? Why will this help us as a team? Why will this help us as a team to support Acuvia? Why understanding this will help Acuvia? Why understanding this will help us figure out how to support Mimecast? Why? Why? So let's start with how we put together our team. We put together our team, there's a specific design point, and we talked about this. I wonder how many people revisit this. One of the things that we have to get better of, when I put together slides for an engagement, I envision all of these things being our design points to move forward. And look at our roles. There's orchestration as a whole. We have detangler, conceptor, architect, capability, clarity, and all of this spent hours, I think 5 hours, talking through what it would be a team. Remember how difficult that was? And remember how better it sounded? Our first tact, everybody went through it and talked about me, I, this is what I do, rather than here's what I do to support the team. And if you look at all of these different capabilities that need to get mixed, unlock breakthrough results by removing complexity from the commercial ecosystem. Right now, I'm trying to remove complexity from how we're working. Detangler, break down barriers to allow people to produce in cross-functional teams. Conceptor, make complex information digestible through visual design. Architect, apply systems thinking techniques to combine assets to be more valuable than individual parts. Zoom in, zoom out. Capability, translate complex business requirements into well-organized and categorized, that should be categorized, sets of capabilities. So I think that's a definition that we need to work on. Clarity continually refines the insights gained through the process into clarifying messaging. Again, something that I think that we probably need to always be amending. But what's common across all of this? How does this picture look differently from you now than 3 months ago? Why are we trying so hard to get people to share what their work products are and thinking out loud instead of polished, finished deliverables? Yet we still have the energy to create outputs for our clients. What's happening? One of the things that I want to highlight is this quote, and I want to come back to it before, is this quote is in one of the materials that we highlighted before. I don't think we really fixated on or gravitated to, but through the whole experience of the Sales Enablement Society, getting engaged with me and sort of the movement, centering around please read the Chaos Imperative if you haven't read it. Ori did his own custom work. So not only did we have a New York Times bestseller donate his time to come to our conference, but what else did he do? He also created custom content. Unfortunately, the only person who was there was Walter. And I don't know if, Walter, you got a chance to check Ori's keynote. Maybe we can find it and share it with people. But what he came to is this conclusion, that businesses spend a tremendous amount of money, time, and energy on controlling their assets and resources and getting a very poor result. The issue is to think differently. So it says the opposite of control is enable. Let's make sure that we have that contrast. And let's ask ourselves, are we focused on control or are we focused on enable? When we solution to somebody and we don't fully understand the situation, what we're doing is we're telling people what to do or how to do it without really understanding. And that's really being in a position of control. We're not in the business of telling people what to do or how to do it. What we're in the business of doing is to enable. We're about making it clear to people why something is valuable and how to bring people together to make it come to life. So what we have to do is concentrate on the few things that cause people to take action, not massive amounts of stuff that cause people to think and think and think and think and think. We have to do the thinking. So that's why everybody has to have their own expertise. But the whole idea is to synthesize all that down into the few core things that blend emotive and logical work into something that just makes sense and that people can have confidence to do it. So when you think about all of this, what's the nucleus of all of this is a new idea. So let's break this down. Let's zoom into the nucleus of this ecosystem, right? This thing, this light bulb, what is it? Well, essentially, it's what's possible. It's also the process of untangling what currently is to allow what's possible to happen. And we're all experiencing this and we all want certainty and we all want to know what is it that's expected of us. And we're not doing enough to tap into our own humanness. Relax, lighten up. It's complicated. How do we untangle it together? One of the tools that we all have available for us that we all can use is the outcome wheel. What outcome do I, as clarity, need to create? What would be the current state and end state that I need to create in service of creating for others? Who's the executive owner? Me, I am. What's a high level initiative? Are you framing out what you're doing or are you just doing stuff? What are your measurable results before and after? Who are all the impacted stakeholders? Note everybody else on the team. Over a life cycle, how do we break it down into acts? Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. So we have this ability to use the same materials that we've got ourselves. The other thing too is that when we're talking about what's possible, we have to remove the I and the M, the I and the me. That's what we talked about last time. And what's left is an executable insight. That's really what we need to do. So now the issue though is, so you have an executable insight. What exactly is it? Because if people do not take action, we are not an execution agency. If people don't take action, nothing we do matters. Because there is no renewal, there is no need for a platform, there is no need for training, there is no need for ongoing work. If people don't take action, nothing we do matters. So what is valuable here is your own expertise and feelings about whether you've taken action or not. What's preventing you from making slides? If you can just share why, instead of making it a value judgment on yourself and like, hey, these are challenges in the way, and we untangle them together. We use the orchestration of untangled together. Is it an information issue? Is it a people issue? Is it a process issue? Is it a technology issue? And we start getting curious about it. Guess what? We write documentation down and help take action. So that's been a big theme for a lot of these conundrums. And if you remember, it's not wearing your business suit, it's wearing your hero suit. That was the possibility yesterday. It's about thinking in verbs, not nouns. It's about, I misordered those. It's about not your red brain, but your green brain and working on those muscles. And it's about doing toast. This whole idea of like trying to follow the process exactly to get toast right is kind of silly. Just sort of put the information out there, and the experience is in the dialogue after and having discipline to talk and be curious about what we're learning, not, oh, let's take it to the next step. Let's just pause and ponder a little bit and relax. because all of these things have to go into is because ultimately, if we're not confronting the fear of the unknown, the fear of doing something new, and not talking about it, we're not going to build things in a way designed for people to take action. So let's go to the next part. Nothing we are doing matters. It doesn't matter how much time you spend on something. It doesn't matter how wonderful you think your slides are, or whether you've researched something a million times or not. All that matters is if people take action. And when they do take action, then there's value. Action is achieving a result, not saying, well, I did this and watching on the sidelines. It's being part of the relay or part of the tennis match, being engaged, participating in breaking this line. This is something we talked about here. It's what's possible of David Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile, which most people thought couldn't be done, but it can be done. Just got to relax a bit. And really, this is what we're talking about with value. Value isn't the thing itself. Value is in the perception. And people are going to perceive people taking action. They're going to want to pay a lot more for it. Okay. So this is why we have the 7 principles to guide us in order to help produce the things that matter so that we can create it. It's the experience, stupid. We have consistently, because it's ambiguous and because it's because it's VUCA, because it's volatile, we haven't been able to pay attention to it. So we need to create tools on how to create attention to all the speed that's happening. Because it's unclear, an outcome, and by the way, is the definition that people use to overcome uncertainty. Well, what exactly is an outcome? Because we've been consistent on an outcome all along. Shoot, we even have a formula for outcomes that we tell other people to do, right? We have this. So what exactly is an experience? So this is why it's the experience, stupid. Lead with you. Instead of talking about the team or IQVIA doesn't do this or whatever, concentrate on your own experience of what's been difficult. What are you challenged with? What is preventing you from producing things? What is preventing you from making videos? What is preventing, and all those are valuable as heck. Just relax. It's okay. Just do things. What's preventing you from doing things? If that's a problem, just keep going. We got to figure it out somewhere. We have to be heroic, or as we talked about last time, you got to have courage. You have courage to go to jump off that, to take that step with the hang gliding. You have to trust the process. Part of what we all can be doing is talking about what we see the process being, so it becomes easier to follow instead of getting lost in all of our emotions. Get yes to quickly. I like this idea of curate conflict. How do we identify where there's conflict and just take inventory of it? Then plot it out around our surroundings and then say, how would we alleviate that conflict? And that's what we're going to talk about here. And then being orchestrator, how about we even simplify it? How do you connect the dots? And specifically the dots in the orchestration org. And then let's talk about what our experiences are using it. So over time, we see patterns that we can document and share with other people. It's simple, but simple is hard. So let's talk about bias. Bias is a filter, and we're going to talk about this in more detail in the what part. So don't worry about it, but I'm just preluding it. But I'm setting up why bias matters. Bias is a filter. Okay, and we're going to talk about the noun and verb stuff later. I'm just painting it. Let's not zoom in. Don't say you have to know it now. Just recognize I'm softly bringing up this idea of bias. And here's another quote by Mark Twain that I like. The secret to getting ahead is getting started. What prevents people from taking action in the first place? I have to know exactly what the whole destination is. I have to map out the entire trip from New York to California before we're going to get in the car to drive, versus I got an idea that we'll get to California. Let's start driving and figure out on the way there. So, and let's come up with milestones. Like, let's just get out to the first, let's just leave the state of New York. So there's all these things that we do that prevent us from taking action because we think that we have to have more information than you really do. So let's talk about that. So here's a picture. Let's bring up the idea of an executable insight. Okay. That executable insight doesn't matter unless people take action against it. So we have to think about people and how people take action. What prevents people from taking action? What is the action? If there is no action, there is no executable. If there is no executable, then we are not delivering on an executable insight. So, because it's about people, so first of all, we have to be able to define or clarify what an executable insight is. Then we have to recognize that it's people, and you are a people. So understanding at a basic level how you react to things. Why do you get pissed off in a meeting when I'm trying to accelerate? Why do you yell at me? Why do you get mopey when things happen? Why do you choose to do what you're doing? All of these things are all common behaviors. And when we make them it's not Tim's happiness, it's our happiness. It's not Dave's sadness, it's our sadness. Think about that concept, and the more relatable we are to everybody, the easier this becomes. And the easier it's going to be to see what we need to build to make people have these insights come to life. So, one of the things that's important here is how do we overcome the filters that are in people? So, every one of these, every human being has their own filter on how they see the world. So, they have biases, which we're going to zoom in now. They have a mental map, which we'll talk about later. They have their own emotions, and every person does that. And so that this insight, if this person wants to take action against it, they're going to encode this insight based on all of these things, maybe more. And then they're going to encode it. They're going to internalize it somehow. Then they're going to worry about how do I communicate it? So how do I encode so that put it into a form? This is why experimenting and always having ways to create slides is also important. We have to learn through trial and error what is the best way to go from an idea to encoding to getting it down into a way that that idea can be shared. It's great that we can have conversations. It's awesome that we want to share that idea, but we have to practice making it more concrete so it can be more leverageable. And we also have to factor in how that information is going to be decoded. We just can't show up and say commercial ratio. Look at all the decoding work that has to happen based on who these people are, what their biases are, what their mental maps are, what their emotions are. And then this person's going to react, hopefully, if we've done our job in this way, right? And codified the message so it's actionable in a way that's verb-based that triggers action. This person is going to encode the information. And it's more likely if we don't provide some tools here that factor in their biases and their mental map, they're going to react emotively. Is this person prepared for a strong emotional response? Probably don't know that. So that's why we have to engineer all of this stuff and make sure it's really important and then prepare this person for the emotive trigger. So they're going to encode their response, and their response is either going to be logical or, emotive. And probably it's going to be emotive first. And that's a good thing because it allows us to break down biases. But we want to not allow the emotion to happen and stomp it out and only work up here, which just reinforces the knownness. And then this guy's got to be prepared to decode so that they can encode and decode and encode and decode. This is a rhythm. This is why carving out selling what's possible is different. This is why understanding the ecosystem is so different. This is why having the laws of science at our toolkit is important. This is why that we break this down as a red and black, and this is why all of these conversations happen in circular flow. Okay, so basically, what it comes down to is this. And one of the things that we're going to tackle here are the filters to hearing the executable insight. part of what we have to do is we have to help frame out what action is. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. If you choose to say I can't do something, it's not a fact that you can't do something. You're choosing to say you can't do something. That's an I and a me. That's the I and the M that we're trying to eliminate for what's possible. But you've made a choice. You have to recognize that you're making a choice. If you don't recognize you're making a choice, you're being a slave to your emotions, or a slave to negative thinking. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. This same logic goes to this person, the fear factor of, oh my God, what if I share this with the executive? What are they going to say to me? To the fear factor of here of, oh my God, how am I, there's no way I'm going to bring this up inside my company, blah, 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 blah. And the more we humanize and normalize what happens when you're introducing a new idea, the better off all of us are going to be. So what we want to do right now is talk about biases and what really the whole idea that biases create these filters, both in terms of nouns, their thinking, and their feeling. And if we don't understand all of the biases at play, then we're not using all of the tools available for us. So we're going to take action on the why part. So that's basically what I did is I went through a story diamond, hopefully you can see, where I covered off on 2 different parts. And what I want you to do is now take action on the why part. How do we take this information? Because what we need to do is we need to trick this logic side, because you're probably going, that's great, that's interesting, what do I do with it? But really I'm using logic here mostly to spark on this side. So what we need to do right now in order to take action of it is we need to connect with our emotions to drive action. We need to trick this side, because you're probably listening for what to do, what do I do, how do I analyze this, instead of being curious and say, where does my brain go? What is this? Does this map to my intuition? Does what he's saying? How does it trigger? What feelings does it trigger? Is it sparking my imagination? Is my mind going off and am I drawing pictures or relating to different things? What are those things? This is the stuff that we want to get down. If you're going here, you're probably trying too hard. And if you're going here, how do we create tools to get these things out? So that's what we're going to do is we're going to use some specific things here to trick this side so that we can unclog this stuff, which you already know. So step number 1 is I want you to recap your takeaways from this why section. Write them up. Jot them down. Do that. Spend no more than 3 minutes. Okay, after 3 minutes, list 3 important ideas you found the most interesting. Spend no more than 2 minutes. Go and do the screen grab, plot them down in slides, 3 important ideas. Plot them down and put them in slides and share that. Like each one of these things, you got to share your work. Number 3, why do you think the contents in this why section are important to our success? So lead with you, focus only on this why part, and why do you think they're our success? Remember that whole, it's not my anxiety, it's our anxiety. It's not my success, it's our success. Why do you think the contents in this why section are important to our success? What do you think? I'm curious. I want to know what you think. And I hope you want to know what others think. I hope if you're Tim, you want to know what Dave thinks of why this section is important for our success. If you're Walter, I hope you want to know what Tim thinks to why this section is important to our success. And if we all do this, imagine this is putting a rock in the stone in the soup and all the soup that we'll have for a lot. Imagine how much more clarity we will have there. Number 4, why do you think our team practicing them, whatever you wrote out before, makes us, there's that word us, remember the we, and remember the experience that we had on the Saturday morning, spending 5 hours talking about what a team is. Why do you think our team practicing them makes us, I should have bolded that out, more valuable to Acuvia? Why do you think our team? Just get it out there. Again, this is a mixing part. And then here's a little fun exercise, a little trick. Number 5, here's a scavenger hunt. I want you to write down 5 concepts from conundrums or practice possibilities that relate to you. Only give yourself only 2 minutes. The issue you cannot do. You can't go back and do screen grabs of everything. I want you to only use your instincts, your recall. What are you recalling? How are you connecting the dots? Don't try to have all the answers. Don't try to be judged on whether you're doing it the right way or not. What connections are you making? Because what happens is when you remember what we're trying to practice is being an orchestrator, we got to learn how to make connections to things that we've already done. So you've got 10 other conundrums and 3 other practice possibilities to relate to. Certainly some things have stuck with you. What are the things that stick with you? How do they practice connecting the dots? You do this in your brain all the time. Practice getting it out there. Only give yourself 2 minutes, get it down. Awesome. So we're going to put that stuff aside on the why part. Now you have some ingredients. One of the things that we talked about is laying the planks along we go. This is why doing the work early on, those are C slides that you just created. Every one of those 5 things are C slides. Wasn't that easy? Well, I think it was. If you just do it, instead of thinking about all these other things, just do it. Just do the thing. And then once we have that, let's go back and review why we did it in the first place, and then figure out how we make it better. Okay, now we're going to get to the part where you think you want the most information, right? So quid pro quo. Quid is I want us to learn how to be more curious and do more why thinking and build muscles around C slides. You want more what? So I'm going to try to play out the what. Let's give some specifics on the what part. What is bias? What is it? So let's go back to the definition. So what's fascinating here is I alluded it to her earlier. Remember the conversation that we had about nouns versus verbs? So I tried to telegraph a little bit. I want to draw your attention to that now. A noun describes something. A verb is about taking action. First of all, the definitions here are pretty simple, similar, right? So noun, a bias, is a prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. There was evidence of bias against foreign applicants. In some sports, such as lawn bowling, the irregular shape given to a ball. Okay, I have no idea what lawn bowling is, but isn't this weird? Okay, verb. Cause, to feel. To feel is a verb. To feel. Let's hold that off a bit. Hopefully that's triggering something. Remember when we talk about emotions or something? Just hold on to that thought here. To feel. Or show inclination or prejudice for or against. Or show, feel or show, for or against someone or something. All too often, our recruitment processes are biased towards younger candidates. or give a bias to, bias the ball. Okay, so what does that mean? That's a different sort of execution. So let's take two out, and look how similar these definitions are. Yet the meaning, one is an observation, a noun, the other is an action, a cause, to feel. What I want to do is highlight this. Remember this and the performance thing. We want results, and your brain and your results go hand in hand. And the behaviors are the things that people see on the outside, but thinking, feeling, and emotions in your physiology all are interwoven here. And this is why we need to untangle ourselves too. Well, what's fascinating here is there's this weird cycle that what you see in your world confirms your thinking, and what your thinking does feeds your feelings. So there's this weird interplay between thinking and feeling and emotions. And the thing that I want us to remember is that emotions are energy in motion. So physiology is what's responding. How do we respond? Are driven by our emotions. Fight, flight, or freeze. If we can overcome this bar here by helping to do these things better here, we're going to get better results. So bias as the verb is people acting on their biases. That's taking thinking and not processing or not changing your thinking, making your feelings based on a view of the world, and then acting on it. Bias, the noun, is the thought or where you got the bias in the first place. And unfortunately, most of our biases are invisible, those cognitive biases. That's why we need to build tools to be able to do it. So when you go and Google search, one of the things I like to do is Google and just create pictures of things. One of the things that I just, I like to do is here's a bunch of pictures of just the word bias. So this is pretty interesting, right? Like, look at all the different pictures here. We have an opportunity to make this a lot more clear, because look how this is so ambiguous and fuzzy to me, yet it's such an integral part to behavior and taking action that we can do a lot of work to take these ideas and make them more concrete. So one of the things that I love is I love Visual Capitalist as a place, but I also like taking definitions of things. Look at this. They have 50 cognitive biases in the modern world. I'm going to skim this real quick. I think this layout is fantastic. Maybe we should make a work product for this, because we're in the decision-making business. But look at all these definitions to make it more tangible. There are 50 biases. What's interesting is the number of biases that we're identifying is increasing in this digital world. So part of being successful in a digital transformation is to understand or create a landscape of all of our biases. So I think 50 is way too many. Maybe 10's too many. Maybe you can tell me or not. But what I did is I tried to identify the 10 most common biases that we encounter. And one of the things, side note, one of the things that I've noticed that some people are doing is creating these, look at all these biases, and creating maps and categorizing biases of we need to act fast. What should we remember? Too much information, not enough meaning. So I think these are neat. I'd love us to classify these based on VUCA. Need to act fast is V. What should we remember? Maybe what should our focus be? Uncertain. Too much information definitely is complexity. Not enough meaning definitely maps to ambiguity. So I think we could maybe redo this and reset this. So this is just an idea. I'm throwing a rock in the stone here. But this is pretty interesting. I don't think we need to get into this degree of analysis. It's way too much information for our assignment to take action. So what I try to do is highlight the 10 most basic ones. And I did my best of coming up with what this looks like. This is my framework for it. There's confirmation bias, herd mentality, loss aversion, overconfidence, self-serving, anchoring, framing, hindsight, narrative fallacy, and representation. And these are all things that I've seen and observed that I've overcome and had to overcome in order to get results in these complex, uh, um, you know, VUCA-related digital transformation activities. And when people don't unlock it and lighten up, it makes it very, very difficult. So let me give you some definition of each of these. I'll pay out the whats. So what is representation bias? In financial markets, so one of the things that I really, really love is there's there's actually a bigger body of knowledge around overcoming cognitive bias for investors. And I think it's fantastic. We want to apply that as much of that as possible because they're saying, look, you need to be a better judge. And in financial markets, one of this representative bias is when investors automatically assume that good companies make good investments. Merck is organized the right way. That's an assumption that people make. Sales and marketing are always sales and marketing. That's a representative bias. However, they're not always the case. A company could be excellent at their own business, a poor judge of other businesses. They could be an excellent at R&D and really poor at sales and marketing. Just because they're an awesome company doesn't mean they're awesome at everything. Just because I'm awesome at some things doesn't mean I'm awesome at everything. Just because you're awesome at some things doesn't mean you're awesome at everything. And with these expectations create weird perspectives. So another example of this analysis is forecasting future results based on historical performance. This is something that we're definitely caught up in sales and marketing around. So I don't want to go into too much detail. I love these biases and what kind of triggers or what kind of unpacking and seeing work that can be done. Just keep that in a note. Here's an example of to me the best example. And I wanted to find examples for each of these. I didn't. And then I thought maybe it'd be cool to ask each of you guys to come up with examples. Here's this bias here, representation bias. This is the stock market. This is the volume of trading volume. And this is the stock price of Enron. People thought Enron was the smartest people in the room until they figured out they were just liars. Look at that. Look at that spike. Boom. Wow. Okay, the narrative fallacy. So the whole point is just question. Do things add up? If they don't, ask questions about it. We're conditioned to not ask questions about it. This bias here creates curiosity. Something doesn't seem right. How does that work? Prove it to me. Show me. Okay, next one. Narrative fallacy. Narrative fallacy. Such is the power of the narrative fallacy, the backward-looking metal tripwire that causes us to attribute a linear and discernible cause and effect chain to our knowledge of the past. As Nassim Taleb, he's a dude I love a lot. He wrote Anti-Fragile, by the way. There's a deep biological basis to the problem. We are inundated with so much sensory information, our brains have no other choice. We must put things in order so we can process the world around us. So we know how to put things in sequence order, but maybe sequence isn't real. We need to find the order that people are putting in things, show it, and then offer a different and alternative order. It's implicit in how we understand the world. When we start feeling like we don't understand the world, we get really bent out of shape. When the coffee cup falls, we need to know why. We knocked it over. If someone gets the job instead of us, we need to know why they were deemed better. They had more experience. They were more likable. Without a deep search for reason, we would go around with blinders on, one thing simply happening for another. The world does not make sense without cause and effect. So the narrative fallacy is applying the wrong order. Here's an example of a narrative fallacy. Salespeople are coin operated. That statement explains a lot of things to people who aren't salespeople, and they take it as it's a truth, but it's a myth. It's a myth. So this is interesting. And this is why is so important. Making sure you get the why right, because you're going to have to change the narrative. Okay. Hindsight bias. What is hindsight bias? Hindsight bias is a psychological phenomenon that allows people to convince themselves after an event that they had actually predicted it before it happened. This can lead people to conclude that they can accurately predict other events. Hindsight bias is studied in behavioral economics because it's a common feeling of individual investors. Boy, did I see a lot of hindsight bias after the Sales Enablement Society. Of course, this is the way it happened. This is the way it does. Blah, 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 blah. It's just not true. We all experience hindsight bias. And this is sort of like the Captain Obvious part. And it's existing everywhere. Of course, that's the way it worked out, but it's not the way it worked out. And this is really important because hindsight bias is what prevents, we changed before. It's like, but digital change is different. How do you know that's going to change that way? So here's some examples. On a snowy night, a police officer predicts that it's perfect conditions for teenage drivers to get into fender benders. When the police scanner says that a driver who has just received her license skidded in a mailbox, the officer tells himself he had been certain such a thing would happen on that night of all nights. So what, right? What does this change any behavior, right? So this is the Captain Obvious stuff that makes people think they're smarter than they are. Framing. And this creates arrogance, and arrogance creates bad decisions. Framing. The framing effect, or framing of bias. The framing effect is when our decisions are influenced by the way information is presented. Equivalent information can be more or less attractive depending upon what features are highlighted. Here's an example. Donald Trump received 72 million votes, the most any Republican ever got. Think of the framing of that. Versus Joe Biden received 82 million votes. 82 million votes is more than 72 million. And what's the exact answer? I mean, or 3 out of 4 dentists recommend Dentyne. 25% of doctors don't like Dentyne for their patients. It's the same information, how it's framed. And that's why framing is so critically important to what we're doing. And that's, hopefully you see this in the Alexis call. Anchoring bias. Anchoring bias is awesome. It's really interesting. It's a cognitive bias that causes us to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we are given on a topic. So this is why I encourage us to resist the urge of when we say design thinking, immediately we got to go Google and boom, the first thing that we see, then it gets locked in our head. And then when you are talking about cognitive bias, or the idea of design thinking, and it doesn't conform to what the thing you immediately Google searched, guess what? We're at a loss. So this is part of the reason why we have to produce lots and lots of things, because anytime we say something, what's going to prevent somebody from Googling? Because some people are so impatient and they don't like not knowing. So that's why every little idea that we write, we got to write it up and then publish it so that people have something to react to and go, oh, I get what they mean. This is anchoring bias. Okay. Another example of anchoring bias that everybody uses is a new car comes out and you see a price tag for it for $30,000. And the next time you see it for $20,000. You go, wow, what a great deal. But you don't know whether the first one, the $30,000, was set low, and this is a used car. You have no idea of judging that information. You've trusted that source. That's an example that anchoring bias gives all the time. I wanted to relate that to something that we can experience ourselves. Self-serving bias. The self-serving bias is defined as people's tendency to attribute positive events for their own character, but attribute negative events to external factors. So an example, you get an A for an essay, but you attribute to your own awesomeness. You get a C on an essay and you attribute it to other factors. The dog ate my homework. I stayed up tonight. Excuses, right? This is interesting. So something that good that we do, we're unable to see. Those who have self-serving bias are unable to see the impact of others, and those when they don't do something are unwilling to see their own effects of it. Very common. This is so common in sales and marketing. It's very frustrating. Okay, overconfidence bias. We've called this the Dunning-Kruger effect. Overconfidence is the bias and is the tendency people have to be more confident in their own abilities, such as driving, teaching, or spelling, than is objectively reasonable. This overconfidence also involves matters of character. Generally, people would believe that they are more ethical than their competitors, coworkers, and peers. For example, a recent study showed that 50% of business people polled believed they were in the top 10% ethically. That's not possible. That is statistically not possible. So we do these things all the time. Because of the overconfidence bias, people will take ethical issues lightly. They simply assume that they have good character and will therefore do the right thing when they encounter ethical changes. In fact, studies show that the overconfidence bias causes people to overestimate how often they will donate money or volunteer their time to charities. It's interesting. So there's a bunch of different applications there. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect that we've talked about in other conundrums. Loss aversion. Loss aversion. Loss aversion is an important concept associated with the prospect theory and is encapsulated in the expression losses loom larger than gains. It is thought that the pain of losing is psychologically about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining. Think about that. Think about the part in Moneyball when Billy Beane says, "I hate losing more than I like winning." That's what we're talking about here. This is very human, especially for the more you go out and take risks, the more the weight of that loss delves in you, and you don't want to deal with it. So you become more and increasingly more intense with it, but it's not really rational. And this is if you watch The Big Short. This was actually one of the investment strategies of the two friends who basically said people don't like negative events so much that they tend to don't think that they're going to happen, so they bet on taking shorts in positions like that. Loss aversion has been used to explain the endowment effect or sunk cost fallacy. It may also play a role in the status quo bias. This is really important to understand. I don't want to lose my position. I don't want to let go. Remember the picture of the elephant? I don't want to let go of this post, even though the ship is sinking, because the fear of loss. That's why we need to provide new things to say, well, it's really not that different. And providing guides to ourselves creates more reason to help overcome this loss aversion. Okay, herd mentality. What is herd mentality? In behavioral finance, herd mentality bias refers to investors' tendency to follow and copy what other investors are doing. They are largely influenced by emotion and instinct rather than by their own independent analysis. This guide provides examples how investors may succumb to herd bias. Well, what do you think this is? This is people jumping on .com. This is, hey, like go look at pets.com. Pets.com is a perfect example of the herd mentality bias. Herd mentality bias is the silver bullet effect. I call this silver bulletitis. There's always the next thing. Challenger is going to fix all sales problems, right? This is the belief. The herd mentality gives us all the activities, and the activities are going to do it. We have to help show the herd mentality, the bias is incredibly strong because we're biologically set up to embrace it. Here's something that's interesting. So let's read this together, because I really like this explanation, and we need to practice ourselves to put words to these things so we can make these ideas accessible to our clients. The key thing is that we are hardwired to herd. It's a true statement. We are, as human beings, engineered to be in a tribe. That's what a herd mentality gets us. This is mob effect. There is a large weight of evidence of herd mentality bias in the financial markets. You can think about the dot-com bubble. Many dot-com companies did not have financially sound business models, but many investors bought into them because everyone else was buying into them. Please watch The Big Short. It describes this perfectly. You often see herding with analyst recommendations. One of the things to be very wary of is that we often find it emotionally or psychologically painful to go against the crowd. Think about that picture, left side and the herd going one way, and then the herd going the other way. And remember the video that we put together. Every minute that we go by on the right path, the gap between the herd grows bigger and bigger and bigger. This feeling of gap is massive, and we have to bridge it. If we don't bridge it, the change doesn't work. This is so incredibly time consuming and energy driving that if you're too focused on yourself, you're not going to see what the effect of the herd is. Think about a circumstance where you stifled your desire to do something because everyone else in your group voted to do something else. Psychologists have found that may actually cause physical pain for people to be contrary investors. Physical pain. I can attest, guys, being a contrarian is not healthy. It just isn't healthy. The weight of the world comes crashing on you really hard. And that's why you need a team to get your back. If the team is too focused on themselves individually, it's actually creating more of the pain instead of the help. So if everyone's jumping into Apple stock and you're recommended selling Apple stock, it can cause you and your clients physical pain. What we're talking about are people's careers, guys. This is way worse than just an investment. Okay, now let's go to confirmation bias. Oh, shoot. All right, confirmation bias. In psychology and cognitive science, confirmation bias or confirmatory bias is a tendency to search for or interpret information in a way that confirms one's own preconceptions, leading to statistical errors. For example, the massive amount of quote unquote studies on there on sales enablement are fraught with confirmation bias because they go and ask sales enablement departments as if they're all the same, but we know they're not. They're all over the place. What they do and create insights on the direction of sales enablement. It doesn't work that way. Confirmation bias is a phenomenon where decisions have been made, decision makers have been shown to actively seek out and assign more weight or evidence that confirms their hypotheses. Here's an example. When AGI does an engagement, they have a framework already in mind. They collect information which confirms the bias. The confirmation is salespeople stink, you need a reorg. There's so much confirmation bias built into the idea that sales is transactional. It's etched so much so that that's all of the data that's collected. So becoming aware of confirmation bias and where it's impacting is critically important to our work. Okay, so these are our biases that impact decision-making: confirmation, herd, loss. overconfidence, self-serving, anchoring, framing, hindsight, narrative fallacy, representation bias. These are the 10 most common what's biases that we're encountering, and we're either encountering it aware or unaware, and this is what we have to start becoming more aware of. So now let's take action on the what part. Going back to tricking the red side, so we build muscles on the green side, we're going to trick this side to allow this side to come out. So we just talked about what stuff, which is, probably really agitating, making your red brain fire off. But what we want to do is we want to shut this down so we can create space for this to come out. Because if not, we're not going to be able to take actions and drive, to leverage our emotions to drive into action. And then we're not doing what our mission is. So number one, recap your takeaways from the what section. 4 minutes. Just recap. What did you take away from it? The point is, we're going for the green brain. If we take each of our reactions or takeaways and blend them together, imagine the insight that we're going to have, because this is about people and humans. This isn't about you. Okay, 2, list out 3 biases you see the most common in the marketplace. Which of those 3 were like, oh my God, that's so spot on? Write them down now. 30 seconds, just jot them down as quickly as possible. Let me help you with that. Here they are. Circle the 3 in your head, write them down. Go, do it now. Don't think, just pick. All right, now, list out the 3 biases you have personally experienced on this engagement from yourself. Lead with you. Remember, rule number 2, lead with you. You. Which of these biases have you done? Write them down. Just your guts. This isn't a thinking thing. This isn't an accuracy thing. Just write them down. All right. Number 4, brainstorm. So this should be fun. Draw a picture on a sheet of paper. Psst, we're making toast. Psst. To visualize how you are connecting the dots between the why part. Psst, you can use the work that you did before. Those are C slides. And the what section. Just draw how you see the dots being connected. Give yourself only 5 minutes. You know how to do this in your brain. You don't know how the words for it. So don't sweat the words. That's why we're asking you to draw it. It doesn't matter whether you're a good drawer or not. It's irrelevant. You're trying to think about polishing stage, not scoping and sculpting. It doesn't matter. Just draw it out. And then use that as a way to talk about what you're seeing. And be curious and ask your teammates to help make it more clear. Brainstorm. Make it fun. Draw a picture on a sheet of paper. Make toast. Okay, now book club. Imagine you are in a book club. Share why you think the why plus the what parts are important. The reason I had you draw it out first is I want you now to make a video to your other people and try to describe what connections you're making, and then leverage the fact that you don't have the full answer, and embrace the fact that no one does, and ask other people how they're seeing it to help you become curious to connect the dots more. Think of it like a book club. Isn't it fun when you go in and say, I read that poem, here's what I got out of it. I read that poem, here's what I got out of it. These are the things that we got the same out, and here's what our differences were. That's awesome. My expanding of understanding so that I have confidence to take action has increased exponentially. Interesting how that works, right, guys? Abundance. How do we grow the pie? It's not about scarcity and what's my slice of the pie. So what we're doing is we're going through the 7 principles: the experience stupid, lead with you, be heroic, be courage, trust the process, get to yes quickly, be an orchestrator. It's about getting it right, not being right. We need to be doing all of these things at once and practicing them and having fun with it. It's fun. Don't you think it's fun learning something new? Isn't it fun seeing something different in the work? Isn't it fun to see how Alexis is responding to our material or how Jen is and the energy? Well, why is that energy happening in the first place? And how are you contributing to it? And how do you contribute more to that? Instead of worrying about whether you're making slides right or not. We just need outputs out there to react to. And we need to be curious and being engaging with other people. That's it, man. That's all this is. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to hearing your thoughts.